Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we talk about Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. Today's guest is Cody Harrington. Cody is here with me today, and he is coming all the way from Etheridge, Tennessee, and I'm so happy to see Cody. It's been a few months since I have been able to sit down with him and talk to him. He's here with his wife, China, and their son, Brecken. Cody, how old is Brecken now?
He is 15 months.
So you guys were actually traveling to Knoxville, and you were on your way back from Knoxville and decided to stop in and visit us. So appreciate you doing that and giving us an opportunity to sit down and talk. I had planned for you to be on this podcast and thought I was going to be doing it over the phone, and it's always nice to have somebody here face to face. So thanks again for joining me today and agreeing to do this podcast. Okay, so a little bit of background information as we get started. So Cody, you and I met, I don't even remember the year.
Oh, I do.
Okay, when was that?
It was 2000. It'd been 2013, the spring of 2013, and we came over here to visit Chattanooga.
Because you and China, who you were dating at the time, were at Freed-Hardeman University, and you guys wanted to transfer.
Yeah, we were going to transfer, and I had heard about the student center, and was really, we weren't going to be involved in sports, so we wanted to get involved in something. And so I had heard about the student center, so we made an appointment to come see you, and it was an awkward meeting, but I wouldn't expect anything less now knowing you.
That's kind of par for the course with me. The word awkward meetings are frequently spoken about. So whatever. But you showed up and you guys got over my awkwardness, and it was, I think, a great. Well, from my perspective, to have two people that showed up and were not shy, not reserved, gung-ho, ready to jump in. That was basically what you guys brought. And actually, you came in and jumped right into the leadership role pretty quickly. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, because it kind of, I think it's good for the listeners to hear. When you showed up at UTC, and we'll just kind of break this out right now. So you're a youth minister at Etheridge, at Etheridge Church of Christ in Etheridge, Tennessee. When you showed up at UTC, youth ministry was not really on your radar screen at all.
No, youth ministry wasn't on my radar because I went to obviously I was at a school where they put out a lot of youth ministers, and I didn't really go there for that, and I didn't come to Chattanooga pursuing ministry at all. And it was one of those things that, if we're being 100% honest, is I found a way to still be involved with the church, be involved with a lot of cool people, but also have a place to live and that sort of thing, and have a job right off the bat. And so I think it was funny how at first that I viewed it more as a job, and then later on down the road, I saw how God was using that to place me where I was needing to be, to prepare me how I need to be prepared for what He had in store for me in the future. So, but yeah, neither of us were expecting anything from it, and it kind of just fell in our laps, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's really a story that we could explore a little bit more, because God, His design and His plans a lot of times don't match up with our own designs and our own plans. And had somebody told me when you showed up that you were going to end up as a youth minister who would actually go back to school, get your master's degree in ministerial counseling, I would have literally laughed in their face.
Yeah, and you would have probably been qualified to do that, but I don't know. I did a lot growing up at the student center. I think China and I both did, but And I say this, and I kind of wear this as a badge of honor, but I'm not your traditional. I didn't come to ministry in a traditional way by going to school and being trained with it. Man, I love people, and I specifically love kids. And I want to show them some authenticity about what following God can look like, and it's not this burdensome thing that you can't go and have fun, or you can't be outgoing, you can't be X, Y, or Z, but you can love people and have a good time and still show people the love that God has for them, and I think that was always my mission. Was not to throw Jesus or throw God in their face. We had one of those videos that we did pop up on my timeline a couple of weeks ago, and Alex, if he's listening, he said that it was our graduation video is what it was, and he was speaking, and it was like, man, the first thing that jumped out to me was Cody, like he wanted us to go play basketball or wanted us to go do this, and I always found it was easier for me to make a relationship with somebody first before, trying to tell them anything about the Student Center as far as faith-wise. It was always more of, hey, come hang out with us, come be social with us, and then that opens a door for the gospel to be told. And I don't know if a lot of people agree with that or disagree with that, but it's worked for me. It's given me a lot of good opportunities, but the thing about me is I've got to be true to myself, and just being awkward and like straight gun-ho to the point is not my style. And so I used interest of mine to be able to talk to people. And
so I want to circle back around to that in just a minute, how relationships, the importance that you find in relationships and how you use that in your own youth ministry. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, because you're at Freed-Hardeman. This is a Christian school, predominantly Church of Christ, and you would expect that a person going to that type of school would have this, maybe this spiritual awakening, this maturity, this aha kind of thing, like, really grasping hold of your own faith, your own spirituality. And, I think maybe a parent's worst nightmare is as far as wanting your kid to be in a school that is faith-based. That's a great thing, and I don't knock it in any way. And then you find out your kid's transferring to a state university, and looking at that from the outside in, it would be scary as a parent to know, oh, well, my kid was at this great faith-based school, and now they're going to a state university. But you coming to a state university, that didn't happen as far as you moving away from your faith. I would say, and we've talked a little bit about this, and I'm kind of going off my memory, so correct me if if I'm saying something that's incorrect. Your spiritual maturity, your growth, your faith, all of that took place primarily at a state university rather than a faith-based school. Is that correct?
Yeah. So going back a little bit, so I grew up going to a Church of Christ, and I was big in the youth group, whatever, but I did not go to Freed-Hardeman for anything church related. Okay. I think it was cool that I landed there, and I think I landed there for a reason. But I was solely focused on golf. I went on a golf scholarship. And it's funny to me to think about all the places that I could have went, that I had offers to go to, Florida and all these golf destinations. And I chose Henderson, Tennessee to go. And I look back and I'm like, that was really a dumb decision on a golf standard. But as far as why I was there, I don't ever regret that. But so to say that is saying that I did not have spiritual growth at Freed-Hardeman because of Freed-Hardeman. It had nothing to do with the campus, and I think I've gotten asked that question a lot, and so I do want to clarify that is we go back to Freed every year, and I've sent kids to Freed for school, and I love Freed's campus, and I think the leadership there is awesome. But I did not go there seeking anything spiritually. And so I did not receive anything spiritually, okay? And so when we left there and we got involved at the student center, I'll be honest, the reason that I think I grew so much is because I was challenged so much. I had people ask me questions, and it wasn't a thing of like, okay, you're doing your thing and we're doing our thing. It was I'm going to call you out on this, and I'm going to ask you why you're doing this. And so I had other student directors ask me challenge me on stuff, call me out on stuff, and then I began to see the need that I was in, that I was going to be in a leadership position, and I was going to be in an influential position, and that I needed to start figuring out what God was going to use me for, and make that happen. I've never been a person that I just wanted things to come to me. It was more of trying to seek them out and figure out how I can make that the best situation. And so, but yeah, I 100%, my faith was challenged here at campus, being exposed to the good and the bad, but my faith grew in exponentially here, I would say.
So what was the turning point? You obviously reached a crossroads where you decided that youth ministry was something that you were going to think about more than just a passing thought. I think you were majoring in exercise science. Is that correct?
Yeah, sports management.
So, at some point it's like kind of a shifting of lanes in that. And now the idea of youth ministry has become something that you're seriously considering. So how did that happen?
I don't know if full-time ministry ever was a real thing until later, and we can get to that. But your kids had so much to do with it, and when we were going to Central, and I saw like Harrison and Kaylee. Parker wasn't in the youth group yet, but I saw your kids, and I saw Isabel and Leah and Brooke, and I saw all those kids, and like there was nothing there. And I said this earlier in the week, but James Lane, who was my youth minister in high school, was a rock for me. My parents got divorced when I was in high school, and they were just a rock. And so I saw these kids, and I was like, man, these kids need something like that. And I don't know how I can give it to them, but I pitched it to the elders that there needed to be a youth intern for the summer or something that led these kids in a direction. And they ended up going with me. I think I was a junior or a sophomore. I was either a junior or sophomore. I think I was a junior going into my junior year. And they hired me for the summer, and then it went over so well that they hired me back for from then on. And but it was never a full-time thing, because I always had in the back of my mind, like, nobody's going to hire somebody who has no educational experience, right? I've just worked a couple of summers at a small church. Nobody's going to hire me. And so it never really was like a full-time thing, but man, I loved it. We had some of the greatest summers and made a lot of memories, and it was just all about relationships. And I know you're going to get to that later, but I say this all the time, but I could sit here and Parker's listening to this, but I could ask Parker, like, what was the one Bible lesson, or what was something that I taught you in class? And I guarantee he couldn't say anything, right? He may be able to mummer something off, but it wasn't that. And it's never been about, class. It's been about what I've taught kids outside of class and through relationships and authenticity of that. And but back to your question is no, it was never a full-time thing. It was one of those things that I got to enjoy kids while I was here in college and spending time with them. But when I was getting ready to graduate, and you remember this, I left school early to go start a business, help start a business in Cookeville, and in installing swimming pools. Like, that's where I was at when I graduated. And so ministry wasn't even on the radar for that whole year that I graduated.
Yeah, so it's I'm looking at your kind of your timeline, and you're at Freed on a golf scholarship. You come to UTC. Ministry is not on your radar screen at all. I mean, let's be honest, you were kind of crazy. I mean,
kinda. That's an understatement.
I won't go into too many details, but you were not the typical what you would picture as like, oh, this is going to be a future youth minister. Then that was
spirituality was probably not at the top of my accolades.
So you show up, you're at a state school, and despite all the odds, you would have, I guess, had maybe, I don't know, more opportunities at Freed-Hardeman to get connected. Like you said, that wasn't on your mind, so you didn't engage. But you end up at the state university. You start, you're doing your thing there. You get into the leadership at the Christian Student Center, and the next thing you know, you're helping out the church there in Chattanooga with the youth program, and all of a sudden, you're connecting with the youth. I mean, there's something intentional about the relationships, a genuineness that you're forming with these kids, these high school kids. And so, I'm watching this kind of just really excited about what I'm seeing, and knowing maybe, my mind beginning to change about you and seeing the potential of who you could become. And then, like you just said, you left and you start installing swimming pools. And I'm like, what, Cody, come on. Does God have to like beat you over the head with a baseball bat? Because when you were doing that, you loved the youth stuff. I mean, you loved it. It just, you were shining with it. It's just like exuberance. And then you end up doing swimming pools. But still, it's just, showing God's providence. That didn't stop you.
Yeah.
I mean, what was supposed to happen, I think, happened. So tell me about how you got the call from Etheridge.
So, when I was installing swimming pools, man, it was fun, and but it was awful at the same time, and I won't get into that. But I remember, so I was in Cookeville, and China was still here, and we were about to get married that summer. She was also graduating, and so I immediately went into provider mode, right? And I was like, I have to provide somehow. And so it was like, I'm gonna work this job even though it sucks, and I'm just gonna work it out, right? I'm gonna figure it out. And I remember crying every night and calling her, just saying how bad, because I was getting up at 5 o'clock. I was working till dark. I was going home, barely had time to eat and go to sleep before I had to get up and do it again. And I just remember thinking, man, this can't be what I'm supposed to be doing. And I called, and finally she was like, listen, you're not doing this. Go in and quit. And I was like, well, we're about to get married. Like, I've got to provide for a family. And she's like, we'll figure it out. And so what we ended up doing is, youth ministry was, we sat down and figured out youth ministry is what I love. It's what I'm passionate about. I don't think I'm the greatest at it, but I know that I love kids and I love God, and somehow this is going to work. It's got to work, right? It just has to work. But I think the reason that I didn't pursue it right out of college is I had so many negative voices in my ear saying, you can't do this. You don't have a degree. You can't do it. Nobody is going to hire you to do this. And I believed those voices, and I sought out different ways to provide for my family, and God just kept saying, listen, this is where you need to be, and I'm going to put you here one way or the other. And so what we did is as I typed up my resume, and I typed up a cover letter, and literally if you were taking a resume, I was sending it to you. And we had interviews all the way from Colorado down to Florida to Tennessee, Georgia. I mean, all over the place. People were calling us back and just wanting to interview me. And we got down to where it was like 3 or 4 churches. Like Colorado was one. There was a couple in Tennessee and one in Florida. And what ended up happening was one of my elders at Etheridge was next door neighbors with the pulpit minister at Willow in Cookeville, where I grew up. And he said, the preacher was like, man, you've got to talk to this guy. You've got to talk to him. And so we went down there, and what was funny is on the list of all the churches that we had, Etheridge was known to have like an amazing youth program and amazing youth ministers in the past. And it was like, if you're going anywhere, it's not going to be there because you're just not qualified enough for it. And I don't know why, I don't know how, but I do know that, like, I feel like we are meant to be there because there had to be so many loops to be jumped through and for it to be expedited so much. I'll give you a timeline. I was hired on a Wednesday night. We got married the next Friday night, went on our honeymoon and left and came back, and that next Sunday left for camp and moved in those 2 weeks. I mean, it was crazy just how things just fell into place.
Yeah.
And there's just no denying that God had his hand in that, because there's no way man could make that all happen so fast.
Yeah, I'm glad you came back to that, because if you didn't say it, I was going to point that out, that God's providence. And what's amazing to me is that a lot of times we self-doubt ourselves. You did it, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't have what it takes, and certainly I can't fill a position as a youth minister here at Etheridge because I have this excellent program and I don't have the background, and blah blah blah.
I lived through college with a motto, and I wasn't afraid to tell people this, but I lived by a motto of fake it till you make it, right? And I got to everything. I mean, anything I was doing, I would just fake like I knew what I was doing until I figured out what I was doing, and then I'd do it. But with ministry, I knew there was some seriousness in like being able to teach and being able to like teach effectively and biblically. And I was like, I just don't have the great amount of knowledge, Bible knowledge, that I feel like, and I didn't want to fake that. And so I was like, all right, I'm about to be uncovered here, and this ain't gonna be good. And so, there was a lot of self-doubt, and it was okay. What can I fall back to that I'm good at, that I know I'm good at, and but. It was God saying, you are good enough. You can, and I'm going to use your talent. I think about Paul was not a great speaker, right?
Yeah, it was Paul.
Paul was not a great speaker. He was not. He didn't always look the best, but he went about it in a way that was effective, and God used his talents. And I feel the same way as I'm not the greatest teacher. I'm not I don't have the most knowledge of the Bible. But I'm willing to learn, but I'm willing to connect to people. And I feel like when you're willing, especially with kids, if you're willing to put in time, if you're willing to put in effort to them and into their lives, man, it's so much more than just being able to quote scripture. It's living out what the gospel is supposed to be, living out serving others. And I'm so thankful that God opened my eyes to that. Many people opened my eyes to that. Like, you are good enough. You can do this, because I wouldn't be where I am today without that.
Yeah, so I said I wanted to circle back around to this. In your own ministry, one of the things that I always noticed about you is your intentionality to build relationships. And that was something you were really good at, and the kids connected with you on that. So can you talk just a little bit about the importance of building relationships with people so that you can move them into a direction where you can have that conversation like, hey, let's talk about eternity for a second?
My dad always instilled into us that to never walk into a room and not shake somebody's hand. Even if you don't know anybody in the room, go find somebody and figure out who that person is. And I think that always resonated with me as far as like knowing people and not knowing them because maybe you can use them later, but connections and relationships are huge. I mean, even in a business world, like, it's about who you know, right? So that always made sense to me, and so I always wanted to know people. I always wanted to meet new people. And as far as kids go, I've always wanted to be that person that they called when they didn't want to call anybody else, right? And some people don't want to do that. Some people are like, kids shouldn't be doing this. Kids shouldn't do this, X, Y, or Z. You just fill in the blank, right? And I take, for example, I had a kid call me one night and was drunk, right? But he called me so that I could come get him to take him home. And a lot of people wouldn't like that. But for me, I knew that person trusted me. I knew that they knew I still loved them no matter what throughout anything that they did. Now, was I upset with them? Did we have a good talk on the way home? Absolutely. But it's always been about do kids know that I care about them? Right? Because if kids know you care about them, then they're going to reach out to you. They're going to open up to you. And when people start opening up to you, that provides avenues of talking about eternity, talking about how does God love you? What does God's love look like compared to worldly love? Somebody in your life, how do those contrast each other? And I've never been able to walk up to a stranger and be like, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. Now, some people can do that, and I applaud them for that. That's just never been me, and it would be awkward, and it wouldn't work. And so I've always invested in somebody and made sure that they knew I cared about them. Because as soon as they figured that out, as soon as they grasped that, then I have their respect. And when I have their respect, then you can go places. I don't, especially with kids, I don't feel like you can grow with a kid until they respect you.
So let me ask you then, what is first part? What is the hardest thing about being a youth minister? And the second part of that is, you network, other youth ministers around the Southeast. What are youth ministers getting right, and what are youth ministers getting wrong in today's youth ministry world?
All right, so the first question of that, hardest thing about youth ministry, the hardest thing for me is not being able to see ROI, return on investment.
Yeah.
I hate that sometimes I may never be able to see my return on investment in them. Because they may go about their own way, and that's so difficult for me. Like I've put so much into this kid, and they just drift off. And it's like I feel guilty for it, or I feel shame for it. But I'm also encouraged when I do see kids that are giving back to the church, or they're involved in church, and your kids and kids here in Chattanooga, and man, I've had so many good kids that are just producing good work for God's church, and that motivates me. But as far as getting stuff right, as far as youth ministers, I think I have 2 or 3 peers that I talk to all the time, and one of them is very close to me, and he came into youth ministry in the same way. It was very untraditional, and so we relate a lot. But I'm so thankful for him because he's just practical, right? I think a lot of times is we complicate the gospel too much, and we forget that kids make mistakes. And when we forget that kids make mistakes, our actions tell them we expect you to make no mistakes. And so when they do mess up, they're shameful about it. Or when they do mess up, they don't want to talk to you, or they shut out, or they close up. And for me, it's just being so transparent. And our ministers help me with this is being transparent with kids, because they're going to know if you're lying or not. If you're teaching one thing and you're living a life a different way, we talked about this over dinner, and they're living a life a different way, your kids are going to know about it. I mean, They just do. They're great at that. But when you can stand in front of them and be like, man, I'm struggling with this. And I mean, obviously there's a level that you have to, be censored with. But up to a point is our kids need to know that even though I'm a youth minister, like I still struggle. Like I still struggle with Bible studies, or I still struggle with finding time to read my Bible or to study for myself. Because when they think, man, he's got it all together, he's got it figured out, we're just lying to them. We're putting up a false image that they'll never be able to live up to, because we can't live up to it. And so I think ministers who can be practical, and they can be relatable, and they can be down to earth. Hey, I'm here with you. I'm here struggling with you. Let's walk through this together. It's no more of a hierarchy like here's where the youth ministry is up high, and I'm down here, and I'll just never be able to reach that level. I remember sitting in a pew growing up thinking, man, I would love to be able to know enough about the Bible as that person does, but I'm never going to be there. I just can't be there. I just don't see myself there because they're so perfect.
Right.
And that's not the minister's fault that they've created the kids created the image in their head. But if we speak out against that and we tell the kids, hey, we're not perfect, then you start be able to build a bond of, hey, let's walk through this together. Let's get through this together. And my short life experiences have provided a way to do that. Kids who come from a broken home and kids who are struggling with temptations in high school, if it's boyfriend or girlfriend or drinking or whatever, I've lived through all that. I've walked through that, and I've stumbled through that, I would guess you'd say. And I can be relatable to that, and I tell my kids that. And some people are like, you tell your kids that you did that? And I'm like, yeah, because if I could get through that, what can you get through? If I can get through the other side and I can still be faithful and I can still have a relationship with God, what is your life going to look like, right? So give them something to shoot for.
So kids that show up to the Christian Student Center, I see a whole lot that have gone through. Well, I'm going to be honest right now, and this may offend.
I hope you're not allowing your own podcast.
So, the typical freshman that arrives at college, if they've been involved in church, their idea of youth ministry, what they've been taught, is basically laser tags and pizza parties and getting together, and their faith is so shallow. They have no biblical knowledge whatsoever, and it's a shock to a lot of them to see the intensity of what we're doing at the Christian Student Center. And one of the things that I am hoping that comes across on these podcasts, and certainly, I'll be talking to other youth ministers as time progresses, but trying to get youth ministers across the board to understand that an effective youth ministry program, and by effectiveness, I want to define that. By effectiveness, I mean the odds of putting a young adult as a freshman in college involved in a campus ministry into a position where they are less likely to fall away. They have a good root system already established. So I probably should have just cut to the chase right there. A lot of the kids that show up don't have a root system at all, and so I've got to start from square one.
Well, see, so I've done some reading on this. I've done some talking about this. I just don't know how much a kid can develop a foundation of faith. The little reading and what I understand is their cognitive thinking, their decision making, and being able to process things is still developing, like physically. Their ability to be able to make decisions on the fly and make sound decisions and responsible decisions is just not developed yet. And so then that goes into faith. Well, how much can they really perceive what faith is? And so I can see that. I can look back and remember, like, I didn't grasp the whole idea of what eternity was. I didn't grasp the whole idea of what being a Christian was or being faithful looked like. I didn't know what that looked like besides, go to church every time the doors are open. But I think it was those fundamentals that gave me a base for people like you to grow. When I was able to make cognitive decisions and when I was able to think deeper than just subsurface, I think those foundations that I was taught growing up helped to nurture that. But as far as have I seen a lot of kids be able to process what the Bible teaches and then apply it to their life and what that means to them and how they can use it? I just don't know how well kids can do that when they graduate high school. And man, we could get into a whole psychology debate about this, but why is the legal age of drinking at 21? Certain things like that, but I don't want to get into that. What I'm trying to point out is it frustrating to me that kids don't think as deep as I wish they would? Is it frustrating that I wish they would take things more seriously, that they would see the bigger picture. Yeah, absolutely. It'd make my job a whole lot more fun sometimes. But do I realize that it's not always just going in one ear and out the other. I think some things when we give kids examples of what faith looks like, not breaking down, being exegetical of the text, or breaking down what the Hebrew meaning and all that stuff deep and stuff that you and I enjoy to do now. Do I think kids coming out of high school can do that? I just don't.
Yeah, and I'm not speaking to that deep of an intellectual thing. I guess my point is that, and I could be biased on this, but from what I see, the majority of the kids that show up to the campus ministry are they don't have any type of understanding about what faith and spirituality even is. And I think in part because they've gone through a youth program that never really gets to know them in that deeper aspect where they've built those relationships. There's that intentional, that genuineness where you can sit down with a kid who's 16, 17, fixing to graduate and really have some deep, meaningful conversations. For the most part, that's not, at least as far as I can see, that's not really taking place across the board. And I get some in the campus, I get some there at the Christian Student Center that is very obvious their youth ministers have had those conversations and have done that, and that's what I'm talking about. I would expect your kids, knowing you, to show up on my doorstep and they're where they need to be to take it to that next step. I do, and she's impressive. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I would say she is a rare bird as far as kids that come through youth groups. I mean, there are kids like that, and they're dedicated and they're hungry, but I take high school boys, for instance. High school boys are like the only people that I've ever experienced that you can be having like a deep spiritual conversation with, and then all of a sudden like somebody will fart and it's like, we're done. This is over. We were like deep into something, and then something happens.
That doesn't change even at 25.
No, it doesn't, right? But as far as I see what you're saying, and I think youth ministers are pressured to fall into the trap of being a event planner, or I've got to have so many things on my schedule. Man, that comes up so many times in conferences of how many events are y'all having on your calendar, or how many events should I have? And I'll be honest, is Ben told me when I got to Etheridge that my schedule would increase 10% every single year. And I don't know why I took that so serious, but I remember thinking, okay, well, if that's true, then I need to start small, because in 5 years it's going to increase by 50%. And then another 5 years, I'll be at 100% more events or more time spent than I am seeing right now. And so I took that for serious. And so we don't have like a ton of events. We have some high points. We've got camps. We've got retreats, and we do after school stuff. But man, if I could say anything about what we do, is we're just together. And you would be amazed when one kid opens up, when one kid is honest. And I'm not saying like tells us the darkest, deepest point of his life, but when one kid is honest and I haven't prepared anything, those are like the greatest moments in ministry. It's funny when I prepare and I think, man, this is going to be awesome and ministry is going to take place right here. It never happens. It never happens.
Yeah.
But when I don't prepare as well, I don't have a lot of deep thoughts here, and one kid opens up and is honest, man, it's just like a waterfall opens, and ministry happens, and it's not pizza, it's not games, it's not lock-ins, it's not any of that. It's what Jesus did in spending time with people and showing that he loved them, not telling them that he loved them, but showing them that he loved them and that he was there for them in the good and the bad times. You think about some of the people that Jesus was with, and socially those people were excluded. And he was like, I love you. And not only do I love you, but I'm going to show you I love you.
You said a word that kind of exploded in my brain. You said together. And the significance of that, and maybe we just kind of should reflect on that. Everybody listening should reflect on that, because we've talked about this before in other podcasts, this Acts 2 church, and the growth that it was having. And they were together. And that, if I'm thinking about ways to fix the church, to restore the church to a first century kind of thing, we've got to somehow figure out a way to be together in qualitative ways. And I don't know what that answer is, but I keep hearing it over and over again. There's certain elements in my own ministry that I know are core factors that have to be incorporated in order to get to the impact where you can really have an impact on a kid long term. I think that's worth just pausing for a second and mentioning. Okay, couple more questions and we're going to wrap this up. What do you think is the biggest issue for high school kids today? What's the biggest struggle?
I think something that I didn't have to deal with as much was social media, and there's so many aspects of social media that I think are so evil, like being popular and how many followers do you have, and trying to make that number grow in any way possible. You're trying to fit in so that you can stand out. It's kind of a idiotic equation there.
Yeah.
I think temptations for struggle with pornography and that sort of thing are right at hands. And just the busyness, they can't put it down. I mean, I can't put it down sometimes. I'm trying to stay current, and I'm trying to stay hip, as you might say, and just trying to keep up with all that is you can't put that thing down. You can't enjoy the people that you're around. You can't just be with the people you're that are there. Is you just have to keep updating, keep sliding, and I think social media is such an evil, but at the same time can be such a positive thing. But I think for kids, that would be one of my biggest things is the social media thing. I could be totally wrong, and they could say something totally different, but that's just what came to mind.
Yeah, as we end up posting this actual podcast,
please get on social media to check this out.
Yeah. So last question for you. What advice would you give me as a campus minister? Because you're kind of like you're passing the baton to me in a way. The kids that come my way, and let me make this real quick comment. Cody brings the kids. He makes the trip all the way to UTC to make sure that the kids get introduced to me, and that is something rare. So if you're a youth minister listening to this and you're able to do that, I think that shows a great interest in the kid in your youth, making sure that they get that connection in college. But anyway, advice to me as a campus minister.
I would try to have a conversation with them about what being a disciple of Christ looks like in the world that we live in, and that no matter what field that you go into, no matter what job you go into, that you can be a disciple, that you can be you can have a ministry. Because I think what happens a lot of times with young adults is they don't go into ministry, and then they don't have a role in ministry. And I think it's totally unfair to them and to the church to say, listen, I'm not getting paid as a full-time minister, so I'm just not going to minister. And so I think if we can teach kids younger, hey, be a servant. I think for my biggest pet peeve is some of my kids like having to be paid. Like they feel like they have to be paid to do something. Mm-hmm. Don't be paid. You see something that needs to be done. You see something that you can serve somebody else with. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it and don't ask questions. And I think, and they're like, well, then how do you make a living? You know the difference. There's a difference, and you know the difference there. how to be a disciple, how to be a servant, how to just genuinely love people. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to like them. But loving people that God has put in your life, I think, is super, super important. And again, you'll be the first to say this, and I hope they're listening. But how many of my roommates at the student center did I see eye to eye with? There was a handful, but there was also another handful that I did it, right?
Yeah.
But that didn't mean that God didn't put them in my life for a reason, and I'm thankful for that. Before you say anything else, what I want to say is if there are any youth ministers listening on this, is that don't be afraid to encourage your kid when they go to a state school, because I know I've been asked this a lot coming from a state school, but there are programs like the Christian Student Center on state campuses all over. And I know several of the guys that run those, and they are top-notch programs. And so instead of trying to fight a kid where they're wanting to go to school because maybe it's a family tradition or maybe it's that, let's help our kids be a light in a darkness that we see as a state campus. You know, there's avenues for them to be encouraged, and I think you'd be very impressed with these programs because Craig does an awesome job. But try not to fight that. I know that's something that I never heard growing up, is you can't find Christ unless you go to a Christian campus, and that's just not true. And so I hope you will encourage that instead of try to fight that.
Great advice, Cody. I do appreciate it. And thanks for joining me today on this podcast, this episode of The Line, the Way, and the War. As always, folks, your feedback is important. And let us know if there's something that you would specifically like to hear. This was one that had been mentioned. I needed to have some youth ministers on, so I will continue to try to do that as youth ministers' availability becomes better, especially during this shutdown. It's a little bit difficult. Final word, Psalms 42, verse 11. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. Tune in next Thursday for another podcast of The Lion, the Way, and the War. Until then, be good to each other, love each other, have a blessed week.
This is a Rona-free zone.